In February 2022, something happened that quietly terrified the entire world. Overnight, more than $300 billion of Russians' reserves were frozen. Not bombed, not stolen, just locked. With a few keystrokes, one of the world's largest economies lost access to half of its financial power. And that was the moment something clicked for everyone watching. The US dollar isn't just money, it's controlled. And suddenly, countries like China, Russia, and Brazil started asking the same question: what happens if we are next? Since then, they have been buying record amounts of gold, talking about new currencies, trying to build systems that bypass the dollar entirely. From the outside, it looks like the beginning of the end, like the world is finally breaking free. But here is the strange part. Despite all of this, nothing has changed. The dollar is still everywhere, still dominant, still unavoidable. So the real question isn't why the world wants to escape the dollar. The real question is, why can't they escape it? Because the truth is, this isn't just currency, it's a system so deeply embedded into global trade that escaping it might actually be impossible. To understand that, you have to let go of one simple idea, that the dollar belongs to America, because it doesn't, not really. The US dollar is something much bigger. It's the operating system of the global economy, and like any operating system, you don't think about it until you try to replace it. What is the dollar really? Let's make this simple. Imagine a company in Brazil wants to buy electronics from Japan. Brazil uses the real, Japan uses the yen. So logically, they should just trade those currencies, but they don't. Instead, Brazil converts its money into US dollars, sends those dollars across the world, and Japan converts them again into yen. The United States isn't involved in this deal, and yet the dollar sits right in the middle. This happens millions of times every single day. Today, around 88% of all foreign exchange transactions involve the US dollar. More than half of global trade is priced in it, which raises a strange question. How did one currency take over the world? To answer that, we need to go back to a moment when the system almost collapsed. 1971. At the time, the dollar was tied to gold, which meant every dollar had a physical backing. But the US was printing too much money, funding wars, expanding, spending, and other countries started to notice. So Nixon did something ridiculous. He cut the dollar loose from gold. Just like that. No backing, no onshore. And for a moment, it looked like the end. Why didn't the dollar collapse? But instead, it became the beginning. Because a few years later, the US made a deal that changed everything. Not in Washington, but in the desert. Saudi Arabia agreed to sell oil only in US dollars. In exchange, the US provided military protection, and that single agreement reshaped the global economy, because now every country on earth needed dollars, not because they trusted the US, but because they needed oil. Why does the world need dollars? And that's when the dollar stopped being just money and became infrastructure. But the real transformation happened quietly, in the background. outside the US. As dollars spread across the world, banks began holding them offshore, beyond American regulation, and something unexpected happened. They started creating more of them, lending them, multiplying them, building an entire shadow system of dollars that the US itself didn't fully control. What is the Eurodollar system? This is what's known as the Eurodollar market, and it turned the dollar into something completely different, but a global network. And once the world started running on that network, there was no easy way out. Fast forward to today. After the Russians' reserves were frozen, the illusion shattered. Countries realized something uncomfortable. What if your money isn't really yours? And that triggered a reaction. BRICS, de-dollarization, new trade agreements, all attempts to break free. And on the surface, it looks like momentum is building, like the system is starting to crack. But underneath, nothing is actually changing. Can the world replace the dollar? Because replacing the dollar isn't about politics. It's about structure. Take the euro. It's large, powerful, but fragmented. There is no single unified financial system behind it. No single safe asset large enough to absorb global wealth. Then there is China, the obvious challenger. But here is the twist. Why doesn't China really want to replace the dollar? China doesn't actually want its currency to replace the dollar, because to do that, it would have to give up control. Money would need to move freely in and out of the country, and that's a risk the system can't afford. If that control disappears, so does stability. And there is another problem. To supply the world with your currency, you have to run a massive trade deficits. You have to send your money out into the world. The US does this, China doesn't, and that alone makes replacement almost impossible. But the real trap goes even deeper. It sits in one place, the US Treasury market. What happens if you try to leave the system? When countries earn dollars, they have to store them somewhere. And not just anywhere. Somewhere safe, liquid, scalable, a place that can absorb trillions. And there is only one place on earth that can do that. US government bonds. So the world buys US debt constantly. Even countries that oppose the US are forced to fund it, because there is no alternative system big enough to hold their wealth. Because if you try to leave the dollar, you have to sell your dollar assets, which means destroying your own reserves, hurting your own economy, destabilizing your own system. So every attempt to escape pulls you deeper in. The dollar isn't dominant because it's perfect or because people love America. It's dominant because it's embedded everywhere, in trade, in debt, in banking, in reserves. It's not just money. It's the foundation. And yes, systems like this don't last forever. The British pound once held this position, and it eventually fell. but not overnight, not through rebellion, through slow structural change. So will the dollar fall? Maybe, but not the way people think. It won't be replaced from the outside. The system is too strong for that. If it breaks, it will come from within. Through debt, through instability, through pressure building over time. Will the dollar collapse or collapse itself? Until then, the world remains exactly where it is, inside the system, not because it wants to be, but because, for now, there is nowhere else to go.